This is Retail Voices, the podcast where leaders from the world of retail and outside of retail talk straight about what really works. Insight, innovation, and the human side of the industry all in one place. Hosted by Mark Lack. That's me. Let's dive in. Hi, John, and welcome to Retail Voices.
Hi, Mark. Thank you.
Hi. Today we're talking about one of the hardest parts of retail, the daily pressure of leading stores through people, process, and practical execution. We're joined by Jon Dario, retail executive, trainer, speaker, and author, as well as founder of Jon Dario Media. Jon has spent his career focused on one core mission: turning store-level complexity into reliable, repeatable, well-led systems. He's worked across department stores, specialty retail, and financial services, always helping managers build structure, diagnose problems, and create consistency through actionable routines. And today, as we can see behind him there, we're going to dive deep into his signature framework, AIM, Action Item Management, and how it transforms the way stores operate. So, Jon, let's begin with your background. What led you to dedicate your career to store-level leadership and the art of making complexity manageable?
Sure. Well, that was a wonderful introduction, so thank you. I went to college, started college for aerospace engineering, and that didn't work out quite so well. I switched to marketing and ended up in an internship with a small department store, and I got totally thrilled with the retail environment, the immediate results, and the way that your work translates into visible, tangible performance. I started my career with Macy's, and I ran a little housewares department in one of Macy's smaller stores, and I worked really hard. I was working 14, 15 hours a day, but I was really doing great. Got promoted. I ended up moving from Macy's to a small sporting goods store, and I became store manager for a couple of locations. And again, I was working 14, 15 hours a day. I was doing great and really having a lot of success and enjoying my success. And then I got promoted to a really hard store. It was a big store with a couple of entrances, really busy. And no matter how many hours I put in, no matter how much work I did, I just couldn't get ahead. And eventually, my boss was fairly patient with me for a little while. He was a big, intimidating guy. And one day he just had enough of me, and he said, "Dario, you're in the execution business. I need you to execute." And he didn't say it quite so nicely, and he used a couple of extra words I won't use here. And it occurred to me that I needed to do something differently. It needed to be more about the team and structure for a focus on getting stuff done. And I just couldn't do it all myself if I was ever going to get ahead. And that was the turning point for me.
Okay, that's cool. So you were going into aerospace at the beginning, so it was almost like rocket science was too hard.
As a matter of fact, one of the books I wrote is called "Management is Not Rocket Science," and it is about, in my view, retail management is about nothing super complex. It's about real focus on the basic things that you just have to perform every day. Sometimes you might view it as boring, but boring is what gives you repeatable results, in my view.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, this is, I keep saying this about the three simple things within my own environment. I mean, you've spent decades, much like myself, inside busy retail environments. What are the most common sources of chaos or inconsistency that you've seen managers struggle with?
Yeah, I mean, obviously the retail environment is super dynamic, and there's a lot that is out of a manager's control. In addition to just a lot of activity, the employees are constantly having to juggle their priorities and constantly having to rearrange things. But the whole business is built on a stream of customers that have their own minds and their own schedules and their own agendas, and unfortunately that doesn't always coincide with the manager's agenda and the manager's priorities. Obviously, as a retailer, you want to take the customer's priorities first, and that's got to be a really important focus, but that doesn't mean you can just abdicate responsibility for all the other stuff that has to get done. So that chaos, comes from all of the external influences that pop up, and the fact that you can't just focus on your own job. You've got to maximize the productivity of everybody else on the team.
Yeah, and I think that's, I mean, we can joke about it, but we can talk about those pesky customers. Retail would be a lot easier if we didn't have customers.
Right.
And the other thing that I think people forget about in management is that, yes, you are there to manage people, to manage the store, to manage everything that's going on, but you have a job as well.
Right. Right.
There are multiple other things because you've got a district manager coming in, you've got a director's visit, you've got all of these other things happening, and all of these things that you're trying to piece together. And it does become chaotic. And it's then a question of, I mean, I'm sure, like yourself, we've all had lots of checklists in the past,
Right.
and we have some checklists that are forced upon us.
Right.
And sometimes you sort of look at them and think, well, actually, it would be better if I did task 6 where task 2 is.
Right. Yes, very true.
Because that's just the way my store works. And I can talk about a particularly large retailer in the UK who have almost taken out the manager's local knowledge, the manager's local feel, the manager's local touch, because almost every 5 minutes is managed for him. So therefore, how does he show a little bit of flair? And whilst we do want absolute, we do need a certain amount of consistency, sometimes we do take it too far. And this is why I think the AIM action item management system, to me, sounds really good. So, I mean, obviously you talked about when you were a manager yourself and needed to work around that. What was the initial problem that inspired you to create the framework?
So, as I mentioned before, I had gotten promoted to this one big challenging store, and I wasn't able to do it all myself. And I started this process with my 6 department supervisors of walking their departments every Monday morning, and we'd make a list of all the work that needed to be done, all the merchandising moves that needed to be done by Friday of that week in order to get set up for the weekend sales. And and lo and behold, I'd walk their departments Friday, what I thought was a good follow-up regimen, and nothing was ever done. And I was getting frustrated, and I was blaming them, I finally got mad enough one week that I walked their departments on Monday morning, and then I right after the lunch rush of customers, 2:00 on Monday afternoon, I walked their departments again, and they didn't have anything done, not a single thing, and I was mad, and I went home in a bad mood, and I did the same thing Tuesday. I went out at 2:00 in the afternoon after the lunch rush, and still nothing was done. And I couldn't believe how angry I was. And Wednesday, I decided I'm going to do the same thing. I walk out at 2:00, and I go through the first couple of departments, and nobody has anything done. But then I'm getting to the fashion department, and there's Regina, and Regina's got a big smile on her face, and lo and behold, Regina had every single thing done on her list. And I just looked at her with tears in my eyes. I'm like, Regina, how did you do this? And she said the one thing that has stuck with me my entire career since. She said, you came out at 2:00 on Monday. I didn't have anything done. You came out at 2:00 on Tuesday. I didn't have anything done. I figured you're probably going to come out 2:00 Wednesday, and I didn't want to disappoint you. And that to me sent the message that people want to be successful, and they're not trying to be bad at their jobs. And Regina demonstrated to me that she knew what I was expecting, and she came through. And it turned out that sent the message to me that it was all about me. It wasn't about them. And I needed to provide the structure, and I needed to provide the environment that communicated what the priorities were and what the expectations were. And that started a career-long quest to get better at action item management, not for myself, but in creating a culture that the team could live with.
Oh, fantastic! Yeah, I mean, I've certainly been there myself as a store manager, when you've given your department head some expectations, and you've been a department head yourself, and you get on with the things you need to get on with, But then as a manager, you go round and you think, well, do it now. Don't wait until Friday.
Right.
Um,
Right.
because I'm actually going to start coming around on Tuesday and Wednesday and Thursday to actually check progress to see what you're
Right.
doing and how you're doing it. But at the same time, to also say to you, okay, you haven't done anything yet, and it's Wednesday already. Has there been an issue? Do you need any extra support? Or are you just waiting till Friday because you know the deadline is Friday? Well, don't wait till Friday. Get it done.
Perfectly said. Perfectly said.
So, for listeners who are new to AIM or maybe new to AIM, can you break it down for us? So, for example, what are the core components and
Right.
why does the system work so well in a retail environment?
Right. I'll start with the second question first. The second
Mhm.
question first, or the second answer first, is that it works so well because of exactly the reason you explained a few minutes ago. It provides enough flexibility for managers to adapt to the situations. It
Mhm.
doesn't. It's not so prescriptive that it's it's a rote checklist. It's about interacting with people, and that's ultimately what managing in a retail environment is all about. Um, the components the components really at a high level are first setting the right environment. The AIM culture doesn't work unless the right environment is in place, and I can expand on that more in a little bit later. But it's about establishing the right environment. Then it's about establishing the right actions. I AIM is founded on an equation that sounds pretty simple, but it's fundamental to everything we do. The equation is actions plus external influences equals results. It's as true as gravity exists on Earth. That the only thing that drives results is the actions you take and the external influences that enter in. So once managers understand that equation, then you can really zero in on what actions are needed to overcome or to supplement the external influences that are at play. And then finally, the third major component is what I call the three Fs. The three Fs are the management behaviors that provide the structure to supporting the team. And the three Fs are focus, follow up, and feedback. And
Fantastic.
in my teachings and in my experience, when there's lots of skills that we try and teach managers, but if a manager can really zero in on keeping the team focused, following up in a predictable and supportive way, and providing feedback that's helpful, whether it's redirection or skill coaching, if the manager does those three things really well, then actions are going to get done and the team's going to achieve success.
Absolutely. I think, I've seen it over the years. I mean, when I was a store manager, we actually didn't have email, believe it or not.
Yep.
Um, so I've sort of grown up as a store manager in an environment which meant I had to speak directly to my team
Right.
face to
Yeah.
face.
Yeah.
Um,
Imagine that. What a
oh,
concept.
shocking, yeah. Whereas now it's all WhatsApp messages and it's all emails. And, I mean, I've known managers in my 30, 40 years of being in retail over the last 10 years who only communicate to their department heads via email
Uh,
or via WhatsApp, which is just incredible. Um,
right.
I mean, I know I'm not a Luddite, I quite like technology. But I think employees, department heads, I think they all do need some interaction with their managers, especially their first line manager, if not their boss's boss,
Yes.
because it gives them some indication as to what's going on and what's happening. And I think some of that direct communication has been lost with all of these extra communication tools that we've been given uh, that don't always
100%.
help us.
No,
Um,
100%. And that management is so dependent on two-way communication. If for no other reason, the tone and body language that comes through beyond just the written or spoken word is critical to understanding whether people really get the concepts and whether they get even a simple thing like assigning a basic task. Just the facial expression on the person who's receiving the assignment can let a manager know whether they truly understand or whether they're truly comfortable with the task or not. And without that little facial expression, you miss something as a manager, and you're not as effective.
100%. I think this comes back to, I think it's the Eisenhower system of urgency and importance.
Yes,
It's very difficult to do urgent and important via an email.
without a doubt.
Whereas if you're actually standing with the team and talking to them about the task list, the things that need to be done, the things that need to happen, it's much easier to get that across with the tone of your voice, the body language itself, and sometimes I kick up the backside to get them to do it.
Agreed. Agreed. I think that you hit on a really good point. And, in the retail world, there's often this mix of three different types of tasks that everybody has to focus on. There's the regular routines, like there's a routine around helping customers, for instance. Then there's basic little tasks like, can you clean up the mess in the corner over there? And then there's bigger projects, like learn the product information on the new item that's being delivered today, and those three things are different types of tasks, and they often intersect and contradict each other. In other words, the cleanup task might be contradictory at any point in time with the routine of helping a customer when they enter the area. And everybody needs to understand, they need to have a clear and consistent understanding across the team which of those are more important at which times. And that's quite a complex hierarchy of things.
Exactly, yes. And at the same time, we've got to give the empowerment to the department heads, to the team themselves, that they actually know which one becomes a priority at which time.
Yes.
And then, of course, have the management have the ability to recognise that. I mean, I
Yes.
used to, visiting stores as a district manager. You could always tell whether a store was a bin because they'd been busy or because they had been negligent. There was a big difference.
Yes. Yes.
And if I was visiting the store and it was a bin because it was through busyness, I'm more likely to get in there, take my jacket off and say, okay, what do you need me to put on the shelves? Where do you need me for the next few hours? Because this is important. Whereas if it's, a bin because it's negligence, it's like, okay, now we're going to do a walk around. And this will be a full walk around
Very true.
to see what's really happening.
Very true. I have, as part of my remit now, I have a retail parking business in Manhattan.
Okay.
And one of the really visual things that I use to kind of demonstrate this concept is at the end of a Broadway show, when the Broadway show's let out in Midtown Manhattan, everybody comes at the same time and wants their vehicles. And that can put a lot of pressure on the valet attendants to speed up the process for retrieving vehicles. But speed is not necessarily a good thing in a busy parking lot. That can cause safety issues. So it's one of the things that we did in the business was created a pyramid of priorities, whereby we said, look, there is nothing that supersedes safety. Safe driving and keeping people in the right paths and so on is number one. And okay, fast customer service might be a number two. Doesn't mean you can sacrifice fast customer service, but fast customer service never sits on top of safe driving. So by kind of laying out the priorities in a pyramid, in a visual pyramid, we've communicated to the staff. And to your point, the staff makes the decision based on how busy the parking lot is and what the customer demands are and what the environment is. They make the decision how fast or how safely to retrieve the vehicles.
Yeah, no, that's a good practice. I mean, we used to have the poaching cards.
Okay.
Which was when myself and the HR director used to go around to competitors, and we saw good customer service. We would discreetly hand over this card and, wow, we caught you. We think you'd be great for our business. And there was one particular lady. I'd actually gone into a retail outlet with my wife on a Saturday.
Okay.
And she wanted to return something. Now, there was a queue of about 6 people all trying to return things at the same time.
Okay.
The fact is we didn't feel as though we were underserved because the girl on the counter was actually keeping in touch with everybody in the queue.
Love
Every
that.
single person felt touched by her to say, I know you're there. Just give me a moment. I'm still working on this. This will take time. Give me 2 more minutes. And she kept that communication going right up until we're actually at the checkout to do the return,
Yep.
which is amazing. And sometimes people forget that whilst customers want things done quickly and they have some high expectations, as long as you talk the customer through the process and keep them engaged while they're waiting,
Right.
it's like the old adage, we've all caught a plane and we've all gotten to the boarding gate and we've all gotten on the plane, and then we sit there for 3 hours and nobody tells us anything. Um,
Right.
you know,
Yep.
it's if we just had a little bit of communication to say, pilot, we're having this issue, I'll come back to you again in another 15 minutes, and he comes back and says blah blah. At least you feel part of the process,
So
part of what's
true.
going on.
So true.
I mean, the other thing that's interesting is lists, and I think I talked earlier about checklists.
Yes.
And my wife is always berating me because of the amount of lists I keep for everything.
Right.
And I think that's just growing up in retail from
Yep.
18, 19. You keep a lot of lists, a lot of task lists, a lot of
Sure.
reminders. I mean, I even have reminders on my phone to remind me to do things that
Sure.
naturally my wife does anyway, but I have to have it, you know, ready
Right.
to remind me.
Right.
Um, and I think everyone in retail does actually keep lists. They keep tasks, reminders, messages, priorities,
Right.
but few manage them effectively. And
Yep.
I've tried various methods to manage them effectively. So why do the traditional to-do lists fail managers?
So it's a great question, and I think I would give a couple of answers. First of all, I think that people sometimes build lists that don't have the right action items on them. They maybe put action items that somebody told them to put on their list, or they think might be a good idea. But I love to use the GPS analogy. When you use a GPS, you put in the address of the destination you're trying to get to, and the GPS calculates the route, and then but it the route depends on a precise destination. If you just put a generic destination, or you put the wrong destination, the route that the GPS calculates is going to be wrong. So I believe that people sometimes start with the wrong vision of what the end result is meant to be, or they don't have a clear vision of what the end result is supposed to be, and therefore they create a list of action items that is incomplete or slightly off, and therefore it doesn't get them where they want to be. I think the second part of the answer is that people just they lose focus. They start working, and it's easy to drift off. I mean, we talked earlier about the fact that retail is such a dynamic environment. It's easy to get distracted for
Yep.
legitimate work reasons or for personal reasons that aren't work related. Regardless, it doesn't really matter. The fact that people get pulled away from their list is significant. And third, I talked about my equation earlier. I think sometimes people build their lists, but they don't take into account the external influences that are going to come
Mm.
into play. So it's somebody might have the best intentions of replenishing the inventory on the sales floor, but if they don't properly think about the external influences of having to serve customers and everything else, then their list is bound to fail. And I think the piece that kind of connects all of those things together is the manager. And
Yep.
if the manager, to your point, is issuing an email or a WhatsApp message and expecting people to do it without being involved and without kind of observing and being in the business and kind of being supportive and taking very, very seriously their role to help people be successful, then it's bound to result in a stray, distractions, a lack of focus, lack of execution, or just obstacles coming up that don't get resolved.
Exactly. And I mean, the example I would give for that is specifically the checkouts, and very specifically in hypermarkets, because you see these 50 to 70 checkouts all the time when you visit the hypermarket, and
Right.
three are open. Um,
Right.
and as a
Right.
customer, you're thinking, okay, why are only three open, but you've got 70 of them?
Right.
Um, and customers don't understand that dynamic. There are a few times in the year when you actually need the 50 or 70 checkouts, but actually you're under a lot of cost constraints during the rest of the year when you've only got three cashiers this morning because two of them have taken sick, one's on holiday. So we
Yes.
came up with the concept of queue busters and wet tills.
Okay.
So a wet till was a till for a supervisor,
Okay.
um, and it was the heads of departments who could actually come onto that wet till just to bust the queue. So if all
Ah,
of a sudden there were 10 people queuing, or 4 people queuing, or 6 people queuing, and all of the tills started getting very, very busy, we could call the queue buster on a wet till. And because it was supervisor level, they were trusted managers. So at the
right.
end of the day, that till was cashed up as a whole rather than as an individual cashier. Um, but what it means is, or what it meant was, is we could be quite dynamic with the checkouts themselves, and we could manage the queues down. And then once the queue was down again, the supervisor jumped off and continued with their work as normal.
I
Um,
love that. There's a drugstore here in the U.S. That has a concept they call IC3.
okay,
So the cashier, if they end up with a queue of three people or more, they get on the intercom and they simply say IC3, and everybody else every
brilliant.
other employee in the store drops what they're doing and goes and jumps on a till in order to kill the line. So your concept is very similar to the IC3, and it's brilliant. It's really good thinking.
It's very dynamic, and it's similar to when the guys are on the checkouts, they can be so interactive if they want to be.
Right,
And another
right.
simple one was, the checkout operators can generally see outside and see what's happening outside
Okay,
when they're maybe not that busy.
right.
Um, so we made sure that the checkout operators and the head cashier, the supervisor for the checkouts, was also responsible for the parking area outside
That's
for
brilliant.
things like picking up the trolleys and getting the trolleys back to the pens. But
Yes.
even more than that, okay, it's raining. So let's move that little stand we have of umbrellas close to the checkout because maybe a
Love it.
customer will want one.
Yep. Love it. That's really smart.
Yeah, so it's just those interactions that people need to think about. And I think, again, speaking earlier of what we're saying about tasks and lists, when we write the list in the first place, we're writing it for a longer period of time than perhaps we need to.
Okay.
Um, because we almost think we need to keep adding things to it to make us look busy. I think as humans and as
Right.
managers, we need to have this big long list of things. But we don't update it. We don't make it dynamic. And as you've recognised earlier, as you mentioned earlier, things evolve in the day. It starts raining. Okay, all of a sudden we need to get all of the wet gear out, and we need to get the carpets on the front. We need to get the bolsters out to stop the rain coming in.
Right.
Um, it's all of those things that need to happen when they need to happen, and that isn't on your list today,
It's not.
unless
That's
you're a
right. That's right.
particularly good weather vane.
That's so true. And
So,
I think that's where the concept of tasks and routines starts to intersect. I mean, there's certain routines that kick in when, to your example, when it starts raining, there's a routine that has to kick in, and that
yes,
becomes more important than whatever individual items are on the task list.
absolutely, absolutely.
Yeah.
And I mean, one of the things that we've talked a lot about, and you talk about consistency and rhythm. Our weekly and then monthly meeting used to be called the operating rhythm meeting, or the ORM,
Okay.
because the whole of the store does have a rhythm. Operations does have a rhythm to it. So that's
Right.
why we called it the operating rhythm meeting. So when we look at AIM, how does that translate into practical daily into a practical daily or weekly rhythm? And what does it look like when a manager implements AIM correctly?
So it's kind of there's kind of a hierarchy of structure that I teach around AIM. It starts with annual performance objectives. I'm not a fan of the idea of annual reviews that look backward and give people a rating of 1 to 5 on a bunch of skills, and I just don't think that really hits the mark. I much more favor an annual performance or annual performance program that defines exactly what behaviors or exactly what results are going to be important for the year ahead, and then I like to use that to kind of turn result in regular action items or ongoing action lists that are supported by formal weekly manager subordinate meetings. And I like those weekly meetings to be led by the employee, not by the manager.
Mm.
So
Yep.
the employee comes to the meeting with their list of action items. They know exactly what they have to get accomplished because it's part of their overall annual objectives and their job description, quite frankly. But they come to the meeting with their list of what they know they need to do in the week ahead, and they communicate that they communicate exactly what their plans are. They communicate what obstacles they see and what help they need from their supervisor, and the supervisor provides input and guidance and help on those issues. And if the employee is missing something, then the supervisor has the opportunity at the end of the meeting to say that your plan is great. I think you're missing these 2 things. Let me add these to your list, and let's talk about exactly how those go. But that structure, I think that the regular weekly cadence of having a kind of stepping outside of the on the floor mix to just say, here's what we have to get accomplished and here's how we're going to do it. I think that sets the stage, and putting the ownership with the employee gives them a feeling of empowerment, and takes the manager. It has the manager directly involved on a very regular basis, but avoids the specter of micromanagement, which is this horrible bad word in our
Oh, it's an absolute killer. I mean, micromanagement in any business, it's a killer. But in retail in particular, because it's so dynamic and changeable, it is an absolute killer. And like yourself, these sort of annual reviews of performance are frustrating. My HR people will know how frustrating these things are for me. Because again, if you have to tell somebody how good or bad they have been for the last year, that's too late. You've either lost them if they're good, or you've still got them if they're bad because they've got nowhere else to go.
Agreed.
So, I mean, we were looking at all of the different ways of evaluating people, and we went with the balanced scorecard as a starting point.
Yep.
But what we did is we took it a step back, and we started with the strategy that had been signed off by the board.
Yes.
We then broke the strategy down into an SIA, strategy into action, and then we broke down the actions into tasks and things that people needed to do. And then from that, we created a very simple objective list for each of the team members. And effectively, there were 2 objectives that were company-wide. So everybody had the same 2 objectives. Right. The next 2 objectives were for a department or function. So finance had 2 objectives, plus they had their 2 objectives for the company. And then you had an individual objective. So you only had 5 objectives.
Okay.
Rather than, if you imagine, one of the companies I worked for had 3,200 employees. Imagine how many objectives you would have if you just left everybody to sort out objectives at an individual level, down to the guy who's doing the cleaning in
Right,
one of the stores in Bahrain,
right,
Um,
right,
so we made it very clear that there were five objectives: two company, two department or function, and then one personal individual. And all of those actually linked back to the strategy.
that's
Um,
wonderful. Yeah,
because it's the easiest way to manage it. And then every quarter there was a review of each individual. So, okay, are we actually doing this? Are we moving towards what we said we were going to do? The operating rhythm meetings became part of that as well. So even within the operating rhythm meetings, what we were trying to do is say, okay, the agenda itself also had to attach to the strategy.
right, right,
So if an agenda item was off strategy, it went lower down the priority list. So it's how you do these things and how you get into these rhythms that I think help people. And you know, we know that retail isn't rocket science.
right, right,
It's products on a clean shelf with a price ticket. That's ultimately what we're doing, and hopefully we're going to make some profit from selling a tin of beans.
right.
Um, but there's a lot more going on behind it. And I think if you can get people into a rhythm whereby they're doing things, the right things on a regular basis, but also having space to then slightly adjust when needed, I think that becomes important.
Agreed. And that sounds like a wonderful system that keeps everybody aligned. It cascades through the organization, so there's, people are connected and people
Mm.
understand exactly what's expected of them, and it sounds like a wonderful system.
I'm assuming AIM as well would support better coaching, especially when diagnosing recurring issues or coaching someone who keeps missing expectations.
For sure. Go back to my point about the three F's: focus, follow up, and feedback. Really zero in on follow up and feedback. I think we owe it to people to give them our time and attention. And if we're the purpose of following up is to provide feedback. If you follow up and don't give feedback, it's completely useless. But the follow up, the follow up piece has to be consistent. It has to be predictable. I take the example in a regular retail environment of following up on sales associates' interactions with customers. I've been a part of many organizations where uh, where retail managers think they've gone really out of their way if they provide service, feedback on customer service. So they follow up and provide feedback on customer service once a day to every employee. Meanwhile, that employee has serviced 100 customers or 200 customers, and the percentage of feedback they're receiving is minimal, right? So they grow up expecting to not get feedback more than 1% of the times they serve customers. All right, that's I think the point. My point is that we have to be there, we have to observe, and the feedback, I think is about sometimes providing redirection. Sometimes people go astray, and we need to get them back on track. Sometimes it's about helping because they've encountered obstacles. A lot of times when people do go astray, it's because they've encountered obstacles. They've run into some conflicting direction or competing priorities or whatever, and they need our help. And that's what we should be there to do: help them, not punish them or not scold them, but to help them. And
Yeah,
and of course, sometimes people need a little boost of extra motivation, and we should be there to do that too.
that,
But
that's a very
the
polite way of putting it.
it and ultimately, when we're really involved, and by the way, I think that managers have a lot to do as well, right? You alluded to this earlier in some of the things you said, but managers have a lot of email, and they've got the district manager and the regional manager calling them, and they've got reports to file, and they've got analysis to do. And it can be really easy for a manager to sit in the office all day, or to spend time doing complicated merchandising moves, or whatever. But I'm a huge fan of managers carving out very specific management time where they are doing nothing but observing, working with the team. And I don't mean doing their job for them. I mean helping, watching them do their job. And if you don't do that, you don't have a good opportunity to provide positive feedback. When you see people doing things the right way, then it's an opportunity to reinforce that and give them the boost of confidence that they need. So I think, to your point, coaching it starts with dedicating time to observing, and then once you dedicate time to observe, you'd be negligent if you didn't provide your thoughts. And of course there's lots to say about the manner in which you provide your coaching, and that's another whole subject. But it starts with creating the right time to observe and provide feedback.
Absolutely, and getting the managers onto the floor. And yes, we understand the pressures are there. There's, as you said, reports, district managers, emails. You get a call from the district manager to say, "Why haven't you answered my email that you sent 1.5 seconds ago?" And it's because you're actually on the floor serving customers.
Right.
But I mean, it's the old, again. I can go back to the early '80s when I was first becoming a store manager, and it's the MBWA, management by walking around.
Yep.
And I think some of that has been lost now. I actually enjoy walking around the store. I enjoy going into the different departments. I enjoy speaking to the team in each different department, finding out what their concerns are, their problems, their ailments, and they always have a few. But at the same time, you can also interact with customers while you're walking about.
For sure.
Which is even more fun because, the strange thing is that customers are actually quite happy to give you some feedback. And they are generally honest about it.
Yes.
Because they come to your store. And if a manager, starts speaking to a customer and are sympathetic towards that customer, you will learn more in that 2-minute interaction than you will learn all day if you don't have that interaction. And I think it's something that managers forget. I mean, we talk a lot, or we've been talking a lot so far about the sort of single store manager, but you've also got multi-unit leadership, the district managers, and we've been railing on them for a little while during this, that they're always pressuring the store managers, but they also have their own pressures. So AIM works for that as well.
Sure it does. In a couple of ways. First of all, look, being a manager is a hard job. Managing managers is even harder. And
they have opinions because you sort of.
For sure.
I always say when you allow people to have opinions, they will bloody well have one, and that's annoying.
Right. So, as a manager of managers, whether it's at the district level or the regional level or whatever, job one is to equip your frontline managers with the tools and the structure and the input they need to be successful, and they need to be better managers themselves. So AIM provides a level of consistency and a kind of a common language that allows district managers and regional managers to help their managers, their jobs be easier. I go back to my experience with, as a young manager, I was trying to do it all myself, and AIM is the kind of the vehicle that helps create a better culture, whereas the whole team's involved and it's not all sitting on the manager. So I think district managers and regional managers kind of using AIM that way too is important. But it also maybe more to your point, or more to your question, the district managers and regional managers want the biggest challenge is kind of the old game of whack-a-mole. One store's doing well, another store's not doing well, and then you focus all of your time on the store that's not doing well, and then the store that was doing well starts to fall, and you keep running around from store to store trying to put out the next fire, and you can't, as a district manager, you can't be in every store every day. So you have to to trust that the local manager is doing stuff when you're not there. And ultimately that depends on having, the same structure I talked about for the weekly meetings earlier applies for the district managers in how they interact with their store managers. So if the store manager is truly owning a meeting with their district manager every week, then you're getting things off on the right foot, and there's a sense of real ownership of the business, and there's at least some two-way communication that's happening, and there's a better chance that things are going to go the way you want them to go as a district manager without you having to be in every store every minute of the day.
Absolutely. And I mean, it was interesting you said earlier about, the good stores, all of a sudden you don't visit them because you're spending too much time in the bad stores. But you need to spend time in those good stores to find out what the good is.
For
Because then
sure.
maybe you can translate it into the other stores that will help you anyway.
For sure.
Again,
And yeah. Sorry, you said something earlier that I think is also a part of that. You said the good people, if you leave them on their own too long, they're going to become complacent and leave, and they're going to be feeling forgotten. And that happens with the good stores when you're putting the good stores out of your mind because they're good. You end up devaluing all the good, and you start to lose engagement. So I think your point is extremely well taken.
100%, yeah. So, I mean, if we look at cause and symptom, this would suggest that AIM would help us in identifying whether the breakdown could be skill, will, resources, process, or communication.
Yeah, I think so. I go back to the equation. I like to use the equation in reverse, right? So my equation: actions plus external influences equals results. There's a corollary to the equation, and that is it's two sub-equations: intended actions plus expected external influences equals intended results. But then there's actual actions, actual external influences, and actual results. And inevitably there's going to be gaps between intended and actual. So if you start by saying, look, I recognize there's a gap between the intended results and the actual results, there can only be two explanations. Either there's a gap, well, really there's three explanations. Either there's a gap between intended actions and actual actions, or there's a gap between expected external influences and actual external influences, or there's a gap in both of them. But if you accept that truth, then it kind of steers you as a manager back to trying to diagnose where the gap is, or what the source of the gap is. So, and I always advise managers to start on the action side, not the external influence side, because the actions is where they have control, and and external influence gaps in external influences are hard to identify. Gaps in actions are more likely to be there and easier to identify and easier to fix. So I always say, when you've got a gap between your expected actions and your intended actions your intended results and your actual results, start with looking for gaps in the actions. And those gaps, once you find the gap, then it's a matter of asking yourself, okay, what's the reason for the gap? Is it because I didn't train this person? Is it because they got off track and just didn't lost motivation or whatever? Or is it something else? And my philosophy is, it doesn't really matter what the reason is. As the manager, you have to accept accountability that there is a gap, and you just have to solve the problem.
Yes. It comes down to the identification again, doesn't it?
Yep, for sure.
I think sometimes we're very black and white. In terms of being able to, we want to point a finger and say, well, it was him, and it was because I expected 20 customers and I only got 10 customers. It's like, okay, never mind all the fluff. Don't point the finger. Let's actually look at what it was, and then how do we resolve that going forward? And when we talk about all of the ails of a store manager and a district manager and a regional team, teams in stores are getting leaner and leaner.
Yeah.
I've done all of the different exercises for right sizing the stores,
Right.
which is a very sort of, again, polite way of putting things.
Right.
I think HR teams in retail are probably the best ones at coming up with these phrases that are more polite than they should be.
Right.
Um, we have leaner teams, higher expectations, a faster pace from customers, especially
Right.
as expectations now have sped up dramatically because we're in this. I was looking at a statistic the other day because I do have a TikTok channel, um, and I was looking at the average view of one of my TikToks,
Okay.
and it was 0.7 seconds for somebody to
Wow.
swipe it
Wow.
away,
Okay. Wow.
which is just stunning.
Yep.
0.7 seconds. I mean, at least, YouTube is slightly better at 23 seconds on a 30-second clip that I'd done.
Right.
But the 0.7 seconds shocked me. And, we can
Crazy.
translate this into customers' expectations in store because their
Yes.
expectations are getting, they get frustrated within moments of something not happening.
Yes.
So the aim is obviously a structured system. So this is now essential rather than optional.
Yeah, I think that's right. I think, in addition to all of the attention span type issues that you talk about with AI and so much more data coming at people, there's a lot more for everybody to process, for managers to process and employees to process, and and so the job of being a retail manager has become so much more difficult for all the reasons that you indicate, whether it's reduced staffing or more information coming at them, or shorter, more aggressive expectations from customers. And I think it just makes it that much more important that we help managers get better at focusing on the action items that are important. And there's less and less time to get distracted. There's less and less time to spend on the wrong things. There's less and less time to kind of let employees drift without clear direction, or without redirection, or without helping remove the obstacles for them. There's just not enough time to let that stuff happen. And so we have to be more prescriptive. And I always worry about this balance between being more prescriptive and giving managers the needed flexibility to make decisions in the moment. And some might think that those two concepts are contradictory. I don't think they are.
Yeah.
I think what we're giving people is a framework for making decisions, and a framework for how they're prioritizing their actions. And we're trusting that if we teach them that framework, they're going to make more consistently, they're going to make better calls when they need to make those decisions.
100%. I mean, when we launched the loyalty program in a business that I ran across 3 different countries, we initially came up with a script for the cashiers. So it was
Right.
a full script. This is what you say. This is how you do it. Blah, 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 blah. And we sort of trained them to do that script by rote. The
Okay.
biggest difference that we then changed was we said to them, okay, that's what you need to say. You need to now say it the way you personally would say it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
Because the script would mean they don't believe in it.
Yeah.
Whereas if they
Yeah.
took that script and turned it into something they would naturally say, then as long as you get these 3 core messages across, it doesn't actually matter how you say it, you need to be comfortable with it.
Love that.
And that again is how we managed to sort of have a very, very successful launch program for the loyalty program that we launched. In fact, we got something like 200,000 signups within the first couple of months, which
That's
was very,
fantastic.
very good.
Yeah.
And this was on an app, which was one of the first at the time. And in fact, when we launched it in Kuwait, We actually had customers handing their phones over to the guys that were doing it to ask which apps they should delete so they could put this app onto their phone.
That's fantastic. That's a good
So,
result.
that
Yeah.
that was an extremely good result. So yeah, we were quite happy with that. Um, okay, talking about timing, we're nearly at the end of our time together now.
Yes.
And as a tradition within Retail 101 Online, we try and keep things very, very simple and keep it down to the three simple things. So, what would those three simple things be that you'd want the listeners to remember about AIM and building consistency in their stores?
Right. So, um, probably going to be a little bit repetitive here, but I think that's maybe the point.
Yep,
First of
yep,
all, I think that message number one, people want to be successful. And, as a manager, if you're carrying around the attitude that it's hard to get good employees and it's hard to get good staff and you have to do everything yourself, you're barking up the wrong tree. You
no
need
what?
to accept that people want to be successful, and when they're not successful, it's because somehow they don't have the skills or the information or the resources, and it's our job to help them be successful. That's number one. Number two, I'll repeat my fundamental equation: actions plus external influences equals results. That is the truth. It is, and I said it before, but it's as true as there is gravity on Earth. The there is no other explanation for how a result is achieved other than it's the combination of the actions and the external influences. And as a manager, we have to be aware of the external influences, and we have to zero in on the actions, and we have to have a clear understanding of where we're trying to get to. And then I would say three, it's as managers, we've got lots of things to worry about. We've got lots of things we can spend our time on. In my mind, the thing that is most important for us to spend our time on is being with our people and using the three F's. Help them stay focused, follow up on what they're doing, not in a punitive way, but in a helpful way, and then provide feedback. The feedback can be good and reinforcing, or the feedback can be redirective, or coaching. Either way, the feedback is what's going to help people get better at their jobs and continue to make progress.
Fantastic. So I'll just add another F there, John, and that's fantastic to you. Uh, thank you
Thank you.
so much for joining us today. That was really good. Everyone, that was Jon Dario sharing decades of practical, real-world leadership insight and his AIM framework, designed to help retail teams execute with consistency and confidence. It's now time, unfortunately, to say goodbye from John.
Thank you.
And of course, goodbye from me. We'll be back soon with another Retail Voices episode. Check out the retail101online.com website for more details on upcoming guests. And of course, don't forget to subscribe and ring that bell wherever you get your podcast fix. Welcome to the Retail Education Revolution. Thanks, John.
No, thank you. I appreciate the time.